This is the second video of Education Explained, and it's really to do with the curriculum in secondary school, particularly the senior curriculum in secondary school. There are all sorts of misconceptions about the senior curriculum, and there are issues that tend to crop up, and it's not surprising that parents and young people want to know, how the curriculum works. The curriculum in the senior school tends to revolve around examinations. Obviously, with COVID for the last year or so, examinations have had to take a back seat, and there have been issues nationally in regard to how both the government and its agencies, like the SQA, have actually handled things. Now, the SQA basically handles examinations, and it produces the exams, arranges for the marking of the exams, and it tries to ensure that the standard from one year to the next is maintained, so that if a young person gets an A pass in English in one year, that's the same sort of standard that they would need to achieve in another year to get the same sort of A pass. There's been a little bit of confusion recently. I think it's probably misunderstanding on behalf of the press, because there's a system which has been in operation for certainly more than 30 years. Certainly, I was a principal examiner a long time ago with the old Scottish Examination Board. I was a principal examiner for nearly 10 years. And when people appealed against results, there was always the possibility that they could, in actual fact, lose a grade rather than gain a grade. It very, very rarely happened. Generally speaking, when you appeal a grade, you're appealing what an examiner has given you in an exam. And a lot of work goes in to ensure that examiners mark to a particular standard. So it would be very unusual if a marker had been overly generous and had given you a grade that you didn't deserve. So it doesn't tend to happen very often that an examining team would mark a young person down. It can happen, however. Sometimes there can be occasions when a candidate may be quite good in terms of their English and writes very convincing answers, but totally misses, say, the geographical point if it's a geography exam. And at the end of the day, depending on what sort of exam it is, there's a particular standard set. So sometimes examiners can make mistakes, and that's generally why a more experienced examining team, when they look at it, they tend to look at it more dispassionately and are more concerned about ensuring standards. And there was a real furore started by the press, with concerns about young people having grades dropped if they appealed. And really, it was based on no evidence whatsoever. Not to say that I'm not concerned about the way young people are getting grades this year. I think in many cases, the young people will do very well if their school has been assessing them regularly, and they have been getting good feedback to their parents about their progress. Then the school will be in a good position to put in a grade which reflects the work that young person has done. And I can't then see any need for an appeal, because the school will have kept the young person and their family informed all the way along, and that's what they're going to tell the SQA that the grade should be. The problem comes when the young person hasn't been given the appropriate work over the year, and the school hasn't got the evidence to back up a grade, and then they rely on an end of year exam or large test in order to determine what the grade should be. Now, I'm sure this will happen in some cases, even though it shouldn't. And then they end up relying entirely on that test for the grade, when really they should have been collecting the evidence for the entire year. And frankly, there's no excuse for that in my view. The school will have failed, and the teacher, in my view, has failed the pupils if they end up having to go back and rely on a test when they should have been testing and examining young people all the way through the session, not relying on a make-up exam. Because that examination is not going to be as straightforward, and it's not necessarily going to be as fairly representative of the pupil as the real SQA diet of exams would be. So yes, I'm concerned that in a small number of schools, because schools haven't been doing their job over the last 12 months, they then relied on an end-of-year exam, and the young people may suffer. In the schools where the teachers have been keeping track of the young person's progress throughout the year, then it is very likely the young person will do better than they might have done if they had had to rely on solely an examination at the end of the year. And so in those 80% of schools, I would expect young people would be very pleased with the results that they've got. There are issues that tend to crop up in the senior school. Typically a young person may do 6 subjects in S4, generally at National 5. And then they might narrow that down to 5 subjects in S5, hires or other examinations. And sometimes young people don't get the choice that they want moving from National 5 into higher. Now, there could be reasons for that. It could be changes in staff, and there could be issues with small minority subjects where they just don't have the staffing. But that tends to be an excuse in my view, because really schools need to plan the curriculum, and they need to plan the curriculum from S5 down into S4 and then down into S3. That should really be the priority, because these are the years where you're preparing young people for external examination and the grades that they need to go on with, whether it be into further education, university, or out into the world of work. So really, there should be a curriculum map which shows how young people can progress from S3 through to S4 into S5 and beyond. If there isn't, I would want to know why. And if there are issues in terms of choice in a school, then the first thing I would ask as a parent is, can I see the curriculum map, which ensures that the choices my child, say, made in S4, are not going to be damaged because they cannot take them forward. I mean, it'd be really irresponsible for schools to let young people choose a curriculum in S4 where they can't have the majority of those subjects taken forward into S5. It's all to do with planning. It's to do with planning in terms of the number of staff you have in the right areas. It's to do with planning the curriculum of the senior school. It may be that a school needs to have a more imbalanced curriculum in S1, 2 and 3 in order to provide a better set of curriculum in the senior school, which allows progress through from S4, say, into S5. There are always constraining factors in a school coming up with a curriculum, but it should be possible, even from a layperson looking at the choice that pupils make in S4 and the choices that are available to them in S5, it should be fairly straightforward to see how they can be taken forward. When you realise that the young people and the curriculum that they have uh, is one chance, in a sense, that they have to actually get the grades to move on. It's so important that they have the opportunities in S5 to tackle the subjects that they want with the support that they actually need. So curriculum planning is something I feel needs an awful lot more attention in secondary schools. I'm amazed to see that the option choices that young people are given seem to be thrown together without an awful lot of thought as to how they're going to be timetabled and how they are going to lead to progression in the curriculum. And certainly if I were a parent and had a child going through and found that their choices that they had made in S4 were not going to be available to them in S5, I would want to know why. I would want to see their curriculum map, and I would want a clear explanation as to why options were not available. Because when you're setting out on, say, an academic curriculum in S4, you really are planning S4, 5 and 6 together. And that's the way the curriculum should be planned. Examinations can be a very trying time for young people. And certainly sitting examinations is something that we're not going to get away with for some time. We're stuck with them for the time being. I think certainly at National 5 there's no reason why the role of examinations cannot be reduced. But if we're going to do that, we have to train teachers. We have to train teachers to mark, and to mark to appropriate standards. Now, the only way that's going to happen is if teachers actually get to mark real exams under the guidance of an examining team at the SQA. And far too many teachers don't take up the opportunity to take on that sort of role. Personally, I would say every teacher should mark at least once every 5 years. They get paid for it anyway, and it is absolutely the best training that you can get into determining standards. If you've never marked an external exam, how can you be providing the best advice to young people about how to pass that exam? As I said, I was a principal examiner for quite a number of years, and the big part of my job was trying to ensure that the examinations were fair, that the marking instructions were clear so that markers could follow them. And also, a part of my job was to ensure that the several hundred markers we had the training to ensure that they all marked to the same standard. And frankly, that's an experience I feel that all teachers should have. You would then need far, far less moderation of schools' work because teachers would be much more confident about the grades they can offer, and there would be less dispute about the grades that they can offer because they know the marking standard.